Yeah, it's hard. That's a tough one to do.
But I think it's how we respond and provide support with that.
I think that's
Okay,
the
so I
key.
think there's a consequence. So you sign a code. There have to be expectations for our athletes. There's a
And that
great
could help
commitment
keep
by the
people
district.
off that as well, but I think at some point we get to, we can figure this out even better.
I will give a shout out to Mr. Zarnett, the first vaping incident that I had to deal with. The conversations that he and I both had with the student, and just watching him deal with students that made a mistake. By the time that student left and got picked up by his parents, he was shaking our hands and smiling, and he really learned his lesson. And it wasn't as, there was still a punitive piece to it, obviously, at 2 days out of
absolutely. I'm
school.
not saying that
But
there should be
you know,
absolutely
you're
nothing.
working with the restorative practices to change the behavior.
Sure, absolutely.
So we just had Tom and Megan and
Grace.
just attended a restorative practice conference.
Sure.
And actually, we're talking about bringing, not necessarily your training, it was the restorative practices, the context, the fact that you worked with students and adults to say that there's a victim and there is a person who's actually the culprit of this, and what can we do to fix it? That's what you're talking about. So
Well, the
how do you
restorative
provide that
justice
support?
model, absolutely understand.
You know,
It's
so
a whole
for
lot.
us, like, that's what we're looking at
It's the name that
doing.
scares people, that's why you're saying.
So, we're justice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
justice.
So, we're actually thinking about having that exposure with our staff, getting
Sure.
them trained in it.
It's just that one word.
Culture.
But
So how do you fix
There's
it?
certain models that can work, and I still think that anything we can do.
You know,
to get
and I will
kids really
say,
stop.
when
So when I read this, I'll approve this, but I look at it and I say, you know, there's gotta be a better way at some point. This is nonsense. This isn't thinking about how to take care of kids. That's the way I look at it. So we can get better.
One of the things that I did as
But
a
that's
coach.
WIAA stuff and everything else.
Right, but one of the things as a coach, as a parent, as administrator, I also look at this is a tool for students to have in their hands to say, hey, I went through this, I'm committed to this is what it takes to be an athlete, sorry, I can't do that, right?
Sure.
So, because one of the things, that gives them an opportunity to have it out. So, without having the bar here saying, hey, you know what, in this District A, there are no consequences for making bad choices related to drugs and alcohol and extreme behavior, right? So there are no consequences. So we get to do what we're gonna do, and then we're gonna go on a court and put on that jersey and represent the school district. There's a lot of politics that go along with that.
Sure.
You know, so for us, we don't wanna go there. We want our kids to do a great job. Hey, if you don't, that is a bummer, but we're gonna be there with you, and you can practice, right? When you can practice but not play. So there is a lesson to be learned as a consequence of not being able to put that jersey on because you made a bad choice. But we're not gonna shame you, we're not gonna go through that, we're gonna fix it, we're gonna work with you on making sure that we're gonna support you through
But I
this.
think that my point is more in the line of there is way more kids vaping that are on sports teams than we all want to recognize and say it's happening. There's gotta be better ways. That's all I'm saying, in order to reduce that number and do things like that. And if we continue to just say, oh, this is great, I'm saying let's do more and think about it.
One of the things I would say,
So,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can't help myself.
No, I
All those names need to come forward, they need to be turned in, and they need to be supported, because they're way too young. Vaping is
Absolutely.
extremely dangerous, it's a gateway drug, and watch out for them, because
Sure.
that's a horrible choice. So to hear that tonight actually hurts my heart and my head,
just
because
from what I've
our,
heard from
but
other
that's,
families, kids, stuff like that, they said you would be shocked.
Yeah.
So.
so what that is that right now it's getting to me is third or fourth hand information. And they
Absolutely.
definitely have to come forward and support their kids. So, that's a big challenge to society right now.
It is.
So what that really means that proactively, we can do more, hearing that kind of feedback. We can do more to educate our parents about vaping, educate our students about vaping. And if that seriously is what's going on, then we have more work to do, to educate.
I was
That's
gonna
our role.
mention,
Let's educate.
one of the neatest things that I've, in my research with the other high schools in the state, Kimberly High School actually has their athletes do public service announcements, things like that. And now that we have the ability with the TVs in our building, with Chromecast and such, perhaps that's something that our Interact, our
We'll have a
Learners
green
Club-
room for video
Yeah.
production and some new equipment.
So there's opportunities for us to follow that model, and, you know, Kimberly has all these great things and all the state championships and whatnot, but they still have kids that vape. And just like, it's a societal problem, but the more we make them aware of the dangers and that it's not okay. And once our students start saying to other students that it's not okay, then it starts to get power.
That's the culture I'd like to see instead of, hey, it's just only 5%. It's the
Yeah.
culture, of we care.
Yeah.
You bet.
I got a couple things.
Sure.
What's the difference between athletic penalty and non-athletic penalty?
It goes by days. I have sat down with Mr. Dobratz and Mr. Cooney in particular with show choir, for example. And we are defining their season because it doesn't go by competitions for non-athletic, even though it's a competitive activity as show choir. It goes by 56 days to 28 days based upon the consequence.
Okay, the only reason why I'm asking is because if the offense happens at a certain time, they're gone for the year. If you have 56 days, they're gone
Could
for
be.
the year,
Yeah.
for the whole season,
Mhm.
you know, in show choir and band.
Yeah.
So I don't know how
That's,
equitable that is. I know you just said you talked to them.
I
so
sat
they
down with
must
them,
have
we
agreed
met,
with
we
it.
looked over this code, and that's, and I hate to use the phrase, that's the way it's always been. It's been in the code like that, and they did not offer a suggestion to change that, nor did I. We looked at it, and they said.
Well, I mean, if you're comparing, trying to compare them apples to apples, why not just make it 25% of their season? If, I mean, this is something that we can all discuss.
Sure.
later, But if they have five competitions for show choir, 25% of that, the person's not eligible for. If they have, you know, otherwise, I mean, if you're talking 56 days, that happens middle of January and you can just write off the season.
Well, the
if-
first,
if
I
it's
think, I
an
believe the
incident.
first offense is 28, or 14 to 28, depending upon.
First
what-
offense for non-athletic is suspension from all participation for a period of 56 days. Second one is 112.
Yeah.
I look at it, every activity is, I know it's turning into a beat-down session. It's not
okay.
you.
No, I-
Yeah, it's not.
Perfectly
you.
okay.
We're beating down our own rules.
Well,
I'm looking at any event a child is in. That is one web that keeps them engaged. And it's one web that keeps them off drugs, in or off alcohol, or out of problems, or supervised, or motivation. I hate to see
We are not
this.
disagreeing with that,
No.
okay? All
But
I'm asking for is equality.
And I would
Try
agree
to
with
make
you,
it
and
as
I
equal as
would
possible.
like to
If
see
you're-
that change.
If you're holding them to the same code of conduct and stuff like that, because I'm assuming,
Yep.
I hope anyways,
Yep.
that you go to the same meetings that they have and you present that
Yep, I do.
information
Yep.
to them,
Mhm.
then they should be held to the same punishment type,
I'm-
quote unquote punishment type, okay? Don't get upset with my word.
I am perfectly okay with
Okay.
going back to Mr. Cooney and Mr. Dobratz and discussing that, and if we can come to some sort of agreement with Mr. Zarna, we'll come back and have that amended for
I
you.
would like to see that.
The tough part is that, so just broken into athletic and non-athletic, right? The tough part is that like for a club that is a co-curricular, this could be very appropriate
Right.
because they don't have necessarily competitions. So I think the challenge is that they're specifically, you're correlating those specifically because they have events. They go and they compete and they travel all over. And
So
56
then-
days is a lot of days.
If
So
I
then
may, real-
maybe that athletic penalty should be, maybe you should just move those up, whoever does compete, that those go up into that athletic penalty portion.
And one of the things we actually looked at this and we were talking about WIA sanctioned sport. We were looking at competitive, non-WIA, i.e. we're talking show choir and trap shooting, okay? And then school activities and clubs. The penalty for school activities and clubs, there is competition there when you talk about forensics, and that's directly tied to curriculum type
Right.
stuff. And they don't have as many competitive events as show choir or trap shooting would do. So that was part of our conversation, was creating that middle tier of a competitive activity, non-sanctioned by the WIA. And I'm fully okay with going back to Mr. Dobratz and Mr. Cooney and Mr. Zarna and looking at that section to see if we can perhaps add that middle tier and change that.
Yeah, I'm just, like I said, and I'm just, everybody knows from my background, I've had kids in choir and band for years. I just think that's putting an undue amount of stress
Oh, yeah.
on the same type of person who might be, you know,
Yeah.
this is my opinion.
No, that was a difficult, in that conversation, we did discuss this, and at the time, the advisors did not really question that piece of it, so we left that as, but we did have that conversation about WIA, competitive, and club, so.
Typically, first code violation someone has, they stick it out. I mean, I've rarely had anybody get a code violation, I quit then. That's very rare.
The only, and I will say this, as far as the restorative practices that we've done at the high school this year, we've had a couple great success stories.
I'm glad to hear that.
We've had where we've worked with the athletes to, you know, that have had violations, and we've done all sorts of, you know, we're gonna get our, as Mr. Zarnett says, we're gonna get you a pound of flesh, but we're gonna get you out to become a productive member of our school. And we had one track athlete make it to state this year, and if you would've saw him your first 2 years, I mean, athletic is all get out, but my goodness, he couldn't stay out of
And
his
that
own
is
way.
where I think policies in here, we've got to look at, is there any maneuvering room, flexibility? Because I look at it with the whole person concept of, and it's not so much their athletic ability, I could care less about how good they are athletically. What I care about is how important is that to their mindset, to their ability to succeed at life. And to me, that's more important than a dumb rule.
Well,
I'm just letting.
Well, yeah,
you
and I've
when
got-
it comes to this, because we're not a criminal court
Nope.
by any means.
Yeah.
And that is where they pay for their offenses with whatever it is. Why are we doing dual justice in this when the justice should be, if we want to talk justice, to allow the kid to succeed? That's our job, so.
and
In
unfortunately,
me.
and
that's
unfortunately, you know, I've been doing this for a very
And I
long
appreciate,
time.
I love to hear that,
Yeah.
those success stories, and I really, really do appreciate it, because it takes a lot to be on.
And what you find is that the one that gets caught, there's 7 or 8, 10 others that
There's 10
didn't.
others right there.
Yeah, so.
But I appreciate it, I really, really do, and the time and effort even for this. Appreciate it.
The topic could be done, but I think consistency in his role, in anybody who's dealing with a code violation, consistency is very important though too. Because if somebody comes in and, you know what, you got a lot of stuff going on, hey, tell you what, you take care of yourself, you got this, yeah, it's a
That's
code
why there should be
violation.
flexibility between this and this, or between.
The challenge would be is that pat on the back and see you later.
Yeah.
They walk out, the entire community is
Well,
now
sure.
coming unhinged because there's a code violation that everybody knows about, and that student was treated one way and this person was treated another. That you have to be very careful when it comes to like, this is like a drug and alcohol violation. Those truly need to be toe the line. We really need to. So I will say from being in that role for years and handling that, consistency is very important, but we're always gonna be there to help them. Absolutely, 100%. And if someone hits that third time where they end up losing a whole sport, I want to tell you that at that point, I'm more concerned about them as a person than I am about any sport or activity they're a part of. So I hear everything you're saying, and I love the advocacy for kids, and let's get creative. And then on the other side of me, I'm like, yes, but consistency is really important in this world. In the code, you have to have it, and this is not, what's important though, is this isn't, hey, gotcha, stick it to you, that kind of a culture. That's not at all what we're trying to do here, but we do need tools in our toolbox. And also, as I mentioned before, this is a tool for a family and a student to say, hey, sign the code, let's make some good choices too. You know, it's like, I can't do that, I can't participate. To me, all of this is your mindset and how you look at it, really what it comes down to. So working with the school, kids, families, culture, to go towards a positive way, look at the resources that are available. Can't do that, we gotta take care of you. Your brain is still developing through the age of 21. Do not do this for many reasons. Code violation, frankly, should be the least of their worries.
And that's the point of emphasis I hit the hardest, is to, you know, don't let your teammates down, have a strong bond, and make sure you keep your nose clean so you don't affect the team and the other people that are involved in that activity. So,
If you vape, you don't have cancer.
So, do we want to approve this resolution as presented and with Tom's presentation, and you will go back to the non-athletic penalty, or do you want to amend the motion to include that, or how do you want to do this?
I'd like to hear their recommendation if he would go back, me personally, because I think that their feedback is.
Oh, yeah, sure. I don't know, just want to, do you want to approve this resolution as presented then? Have him come back with the change, or?
Correct.
Yes,
Yes.
I'll go with that.
Okay. So any questions for Tom on the, any other questions for the co-curricular handbook?
Tom, I appreciate what you're doing. I really, really do.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate that.
Always been a problem.
Dave?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried 5-0-1. Thanks, Tom.
thank you. Is there anything else for me? I've got a booster club meeting that I gotta get to. So, thank you. Great.
We'll call you back.
Cool.
All right, I'm on call.
The old business. Additional citizen comments? Announcements? Just to give an update on Norb is still having some health issues, so keep doing your thoughts. He's having low blood pressure problems. So we will continue to support him as needed. So at this time, the board intends to convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 19.85, parent 1, parent C, to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of various district administrative, professional staff, and support staff over which the board has jurisdiction or exercise responsibility. The board will be discussing support staff and exempt staff's compensation. With the motion, motion by Joe.
Second.
Second by Jim. Joe?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried 5-0-1. We will then reconvene into open session.